Hello, everyone. Welcome to Metaphysical Communion number 8, the Cryptids. Hello, I am the Angelus Colon. For those of you who are new to the program, I am your host for this weekly series. We are in season number 3. Anyway, let's get started right away because I have a very tight program this evening and I want to cover as much as I can in the time allotted, okay? I don't want to go overboard. I don't want to keep you all, from doing other things. And it's Friday night after all. So anyway, welcome. It's a beautiful Friday evening here in New York City where we are broadcasting from. And we're going to talk about a fascinating subject many of you are very familiar with from seeing so much of them on television and cable, so many programs devoted to them, the cryptids. And for those of you who are not familiar with that particular term, that is the term that is used for such legendary beings such as Bigfoot, Sasquatch, the Loch Ness Monster, the Chupacabra, and several others that we've seen many times or we've read about in magazines, in newspapers, on television, in cable series. We have entire specials now devoted to them, docu-series also. So they are quite well known out there, at least the most famous ones. But what we're going to talk about this evening actually is those that are not so really covered in the media as much. I wanted to give a little bit more of a highlight into those other beings because there are many different types of cryptids on the planet and have been for many, many years, many decades, and many centuries. They're all over the world. Every country, every culture seems to have their own, cryptid, their own monster, as we know them more here as well in the United States. We're going to cover some that are familiar, a little bit more familiar to the United States, obviously, and one in England that I've selected. I've selected the cryptids that we're going to be talking about this evening because of, one, personal interest. I just found them particularly intriguing and mysterious. Two, there was some high level of credibility attached to each one of them. So I have seen evidence on video and heard, from eyewitnesses, who have actually seen and experienced these creatures. And they seemed quite convincing, quite real, quite genuine people. These are not individuals that are prone to making up stories. They're certainly not mentally ill. Many of them have very respectable professions, are very well known in their communities, are not prone to drama or any kind of hysterical, melodrama, in their lives or known, in their respective places of residence. So for that, I also found this to be interesting as well and credible. We're going to be covering 4 of them this evening because it gives enough time, to devote enough, for each and everyone to give them a description. Perhaps some of you are out there are familiar with some of these beings already. They have been appeared on television from time to time. Again, they're not as famous or as popular as, let's say, Bigfoot or the Loch Ness Monster, or several other well-known creatures out there, but they have been discussed on television. They have been brought about, in the internet, in magazines, in newspapers, not just as well known, but still they are mysterious, and there's something there that touches upon reality. And that's why I was drawn to them, that there's something more than just myth going on here. There's something more going on than just a story or people making up things just to get their face on the news for 15 minutes of fame. And enough people have seen them, or enough credible experiences, real down-to-earth descriptions have taken place that they really should be viewed, with a sense of open-mindedness. Skepticism, of course, is always welcome. I am a very skeptical person, despite being so open-minded to all, of these things. But I always like to do research, read about them, find evidence as much as I can, not just through, looking through videos or looking through eyewitness accounts, but just using my intuition and senses, also, which has always led me, correct for many, many things. And when I get a particular feeling or a sense of something being real, I go with it. And usually it proves out to be 100% true. It may take some time, especially with this particular subject matter, but eventually the truth is revealed. So on that note, I'm going to make sure of a few things before we continue. Like number one, to see who's out there in the audience. Number two, to see also if I am being understood and being seen, first of all. Let me have a look and see over here as I connect a little bit better here on Facebook, just to see what's happening here. And let's see. Yeah, that's interesting. So I've been talking about just the recording, but not being visually seen here. So let's see what's going on. Everything seemed to come on just fine before. And now we see that things are not really there. Well, again, the typical technological mishaps that occur weekly. So let me see if I can, get this to be up and running the way it's supposed to be on Facebook, as well as through Zoom. And if not, it says it's live. And here we go. All right. Now I see myself. That's good. That's a good sign because it's live. And here we go. All right. Now I see myself. That's good. It's a good sign. Okay, good. So I can see myself on Facebook at the moment. Let me just zoom out for a moment here. Come back again, checking all of my connections. And coming back to Zoom specifically. Let me just back up so you can see my full head, not just a portion of it. We always have a bit of comedy going on here at the same time. And well, it makes it exciting, doesn't it? We always have a bit of comedy going on here at the same time. And so I hope that this is visually and audio-wise being seen properly. I can hear myself very well, seeing myself on Facebook, so that's a good thing. And I think we'll stay with that. Hope for the best. And that's all we can hope for. Okay. I'm going to keep my eye on Facebook, but I'm also going to go back into my Zoom screen where I'm, officially broadcasting from. Hope all of you can see this. Good. Excellent. Good. All right. So let's commence with the program. Whether we have a live audience or not, certainly people will be able to view this later on, as I save all of the programs on Facebook Live and on Zoom. And of course, they go into my Metaphysical Communion channel on YouTube. So they can be seen in a variety of ways. And let's see, I'm just going to check here for a moment. I have a bit of a presentation also that will accompany tonight's show. And then once we get through the first portion of the program, which is on the cryptids, I'm also going to save time to do spot readings for the audience out there, as I promised last week. So it is the season of spirit, as I call it, is Halloween time. And I always like to be, offering, readings for the audience out there, and people can connect, and hopefully I can tune in properly for you and answer your questions, or hopefully, provide some information, messages that'll be meaningful for you, that'll be helpful to guide you along your journey. So we'll be doing that tonight also. So it is 8:48 right now. Give it another 2 minutes. And we'll begin officially at 8:50 with our main program here. So I'm just checking again a little bit here and there for my connections. Very good. Excellent. So far, so good. So I hope everyone has had a good week. It's been a bit challenging, but we're finally through Mercury Retrograde. That came to a conclusion this past Monday, October 18th. And now we're going to go back into direct. So it'll take a few days, about a week or so, for that to really acclimate and get, ourselves back, in normal, speed, normal direction. Mercury retrograde was rough this particular last 3 weeks, and the last few days have had a few little bumps in the road, which is expected. Just because the planet goes direct automatically doesn't mean that everything just falls into place beautifully as well. It sometimes is a bit rough. Sometimes you get some unexpected circumstances happening. I know it happened to me. Just yesterday in the morning, I go into the elevator of my building and I'm heading downstairs early in the morning to go to work. And just before the elevator is about to open, it stops. So there I am stuck in my elevator in our brand new elevator, which was just repaired. And it took almost 2 months to put in a whole new system in there, new parts, new everything, apart from what they say, and just started working very nicely earlier in the week. And then suddenly it just went dead with me and the bicycle in it, alone. So luckily our elevator has a button that you press and help is on the way. Took a while, however, but they finally got me out. I didn't even know what floor I was stuck between because there was things flashing on the elevator screens. I wasn't sure, but I got to tell them what I was experiencing. It took several minutes, it took quite a while, but between all of the walkie-talkies and the talking back and forth and the clanging and the elevator moving here and there a bit, they finally were able to get me out. So that was an exciting start, to my morning yesterday. Again, mechanical failures, all part of Mercury retrograde. And just because it went direct a few days before doesn't mean that these things still cannot occur. It is well known that it takes a while for the planet's energies to settle and to normalize and go direct properly once again. So I certainly have been the recipient of that in the last 3 weeks and even more. And hopefully things will start to level out by the weekend for all of us. So I wish everyone good luck. Now, let's begin our program officially. So welcome to Metaphysical Communion 8, Season 3. Tonight's subject is the cryptids. So we're going to talk about some lesser known of these fascinating, mysterious beings that are seen out there throughout the world. I've selected 4 in particular due to my particular sense of reality, that there's something real to them. It's more than just a story, more than just people making up things, more than just mythology. There's something credible, there, and there has been many, many, many people who have seen and experienced these beings. People that are very respected, that are healthy, that have long, histories in their places of their residence, where they reside. They're not known for being, out of their mind or hysterical or melodramatic. These are upstanding citizens. Many have very respectable, jobs in many different fields, regular people who have just had, let's say, paranormal experiences. So let's get into our program. We do have a presentation that goes with this. I'm going to share screen with this, and let's hope for the best. And here we go. So welcome to the cryptids, and let me just bump this a little bit over here, see if it works. If not, let's see. Excuse me a second, I get this in order. Let's see. Okay, here we go. Perfect. And let's hope that everything else works perfectly from here. So here we are, October 22nd, and we're just at the very end of Libra. So we're celebrating that. We had a very powerful full moon in Aries, also on the 20th I hope you received a lot of good, strong energy there, very positive, energetic, infusing a lot of vitality, new changes, welcoming of new changes, seeing what's out there for you all. And so we have a lot of astronomical energy and astrological energy, changing and taking place. We are in the Halloween season, as I said. So this program fits beautifully with the season of monsters and ghouls and things that scare you in the night. So the Cryptids begins, now. So welcome. So the first monster that I selected to talk about, or the first cryptid, was one that I became familiar with way back in the early 70s. And this monster, for quite a while, became pretty much well known. It was the first of these beings that I became familiar with. Now, back then, and we still do read, these magazines such as the National Enquirer, the Star, the Examiner, the Globe. They got a lot of popularity back then, especially, and to a degree, they still are popular. And during the 70s, they used to highlight a lot of paranormal, metaphysical, experiences and articles. And they used to talk a lot about psychics and mediums and exorcisms and demons and monsters. And they still do, I guess, to a certain point. I haven't bought that magazine in quite a while. So I know it's changed somewhat in the last 40 years or so. But at that time, we used to get it regularly. My mother's an avid reader, and she used to buy it regularly from the supermarket. So we used to get the Star and the Enquirer weekly. So I used to look into the magazines because there was some interesting and fun things also there, besides the celebrities, the gossip. And among those things were these types of fascinating creatures and beings that they would write about. And they were always keeping current up to date with these beings. Whenever there was a sighting and experience, they would immediately write or send a reporter out there to where they were happening and interview the people who experienced these things. And then they prepare a report and an article, whether they were such monsters or the UFOs or psychics or whatever. They were always current with all that information. So one of the first monsters that I became familiar with was the one called Momo, the Missouri Monster. They call it Momo affectionately because it's shorter than saying Missouri Monster. This was way back in 1971 and 72, and they would write fairly regularly about this being, especially whenever there was a new sighting. So I remember the articles that used to be written, pretty well detailed. Photographs, of the actual people of the witnesses. They would present drawings or whatever, or photographs of supposed, beings or whatever. In the case of Momo, it was very mysterious. And Momo was actually seen in Louisiana, Missouri, as well, in a particular area, just a particular environment. He wasn't, or the being wasn't exactly widespread. Louisiana, Missouri was a small town, of course, middle America, heartland. A few people started seeing this mysterious being out near the woods, not near, more secluded areas or so. The first report did happen in 1971. And there were two women out there who were having lunch, that day. And it was in broad daylight. And they were out there, going into the woods, just enjoying nature, as they had done for many, many years. And while they were out there, they suddenly got the sense that something was spotting them. And then this tremendous, for lack of a better way of saying it, odor manifested. And it was quite pungent and absolutely terrible. Things they never experienced before. So as they looked around, suddenly they saw coming out of the bush this incredible looking being, about 7 feet tall, covered in matted hair, kind of like chestnut brown, dark brown, with a giant head, which they described like a pumpkin, head. The head was larger actually than the body. Even though it was such a large being, still the head was even more massive. Staring at them, and it had red, orange, glowing eyes, long fingers and claws. So they couldn't believe what they were seeing. As you see here in the presentation, I have a depiction that was drawn of the Missouri Monster. And as you can see there, and then to the right, you see a representation, a recreation of Momo. So they did a very good representation or recreation of it, actually, because from what I understand, that's pretty much what he actually looks like. So imagine, being out there in the woods or in a park somewhere, and suddenly you look and there's a 7-foot hairy thing like that staring back at you. And then back in the 70s, especially when these things weren't so well known, it was quite horrifying, to say the least. So the women saw this, they dropped everything, and they ran towards their car. They report that the monster started chasing after them. And they were successfully able to get back into their car, lock the car, but the creature came close enough where it started to try to open the door and try to get at them. So needless to say, the women were luckily able to take off, and, were able to, escape, unscathed. And they reported this situation to the police, etc. And then word got out. And immediately, of course, reporters started seizing upon the story and descended upon the small town of Louisiana, Missouri, to interview these witnesses and for them to speak about what occurred. As you can see, I've also placed an article, one of the numerous articles that were written at that time. Momo, lasted for quite a while there. Other people did get to see the monster back in 1972. 2 boys and their sister were actually at their home. The boys were playing outside in the backyard. Their older sister was in the kitchen, which had a window that faced the backyard, and she was busy doing the dishes. And she could keep her eye on her 2 younger brothers, out there as they were playing in the backyard. And of course, a rural type of environment, they weren't too far away from the woods, area from their backyard. So suddenly she heard the boys start screaming, and terrified. So she looks out the window. The boys are looking towards the woods. And what do they see? But there's this gigantic, being covered in matted hair, the orange-red eyes glowing, and the incredible stench that emanated from it. The monster was staring back at them with an intense gaze and holding a dead dog in its arm. So they saw this for a few minutes. The monster apparently panicked when it was recognized and ran off into the woods. So that was another major eyewitness account. And of course, there were more articles written, about that, there. And certainly it appeared in the Enquirer, in the Star, and even got on television a few times also. So from there, in the course of a year or so, there were other numerous accounts of people spotting this creature, again, near the woods, near the forests, over there. The monster never really did attack. As soon as it was spotted, it would just run off into the woods and disappear. One of the most respectable citizens was the fire chief, there, Richard Allen Murray, who also reported a sighting of Momo one day when he was driving. And he noticed, like, to his left, he was seeing some of the woodlands from the road, and he saw like something standing there, like a tall person from the distance. So he pulled up closer, and as he did, he noticed that the person was not exactly a person, but was this gigantic ape-like looking being, just staring back at him, also. And he couldn't believe what he was seeing. And even though this lasted just a few seconds, the creature immediately ran off, into the woods. But Chief Murray was very clear about his description, and he was doubting, his reality there for a while. But he came to terms that indeed he saw exactly what he did, and he it concurred with what the other eyewitnesses were reporting about this incredible being. Now, even though Momo chased the women that one time, it didn't seem that after there were any more violent, experiences. People would spot it or whatever, and it would just disappear, run into the forest. Most of the time, it's just a matter of a few seconds that they saw it. But enough people did see it, to make this one of the more credible, experiences happening in regards to this type of cryptid. So as I wrote here, several other people saw Momo in the course of that year. They finally sent out a posse of about 20 people or more to go searching, for Momo. So they went out there several times, out there into the forests, into the woodlands there of Louisiana, Missouri. They never found him, except one time they did find a giant footprint where they immediately made a cast, of that. And they sent it for scientific, study and investigation. The examiners took a good look at it, but they deemed it eventually as being a fake. However, going back into the early 70s, when it came to this type of thing in regards to cryptids, such as Sasquatch, Momo, for instance, scientists were not exactly that as open-minded, back then. They didn't have the sophisticated technology that they have now either to really analyze these things, properly. And at that time, the government, if they took wind of this, were very, very quick at silencing, people. And so who knows, if they actually did see something that was, factual, but couldn't report it because they were forbidden to. And at that time, the government had a stronger hold on these things than they do now. Now it's completely changed. We see, people speaking left and right about all these types of experiences. They're constantly on television shows every week. You can see a new show popping up, describing, one of these beings or so, with numerous amounts of eyewitnesses, people who have kept their mouths shut for 40, 50 or more years, finally, speaking up, for no longer having fear of being seen as insane or of being threatened in any way or so. People are now speaking up. So I do believe that Momo is one of those beings, one of these cryptids that should be revisited. And I know that they still talk about the Missouri Monster. They're in that region. They have not forgotten it. And it does come up from time to time, occasionally, locally. They even created a movie about the experience. So what you see here on the screen is actually a poster that was created for that movie, Momo, the Missouri Monster, in 2019. So that was quite recent, just before the COVID pandemic hit. They filmed this docu-movie. And it was based on the real life experiences of the eyewitnesses. And I guess a bit of drama thrown in, detailing, what this monster, was about, what occurred back then in the 70s. And so from time to time, it's revived. So let's see if they can take another look, at this being, because again, enough people saw it to simply dismiss it. At that time in the 70s, the phenomenon only lasted for a little over a year. After that, people didn't really see the creature, pretty much after 72, 73. So for whatever reason, the monster either was there for a period of time and then went back to wherever he came from, whether it's another dimension, whether another experience or so, moved on. Never really been talked about that much again since then. People moved on with their lives. A lot of people moved away. This is a small town, after all, in the middle, of Missouri. A lot of people moved into the city. So it seemed like, the monster was pretty much forgotten for a while. But I said, from time to time, you do see something or read something about this. And it looks like with this movie that happened as well, maybe somebody will look more into this once again, go exploring, investigating, to see if they can discover something somehow after all this time. I mean, they do it constantly. Researchers and people who go out there, go back, after decades, and to look for evidence, some sort of something that could tell them that indeed there was something real about this. So let's see what happens. This was the first monster that I said that I became more familiar with, even before Bigfoot, Sasquatch. Even though Sasquatch was really reported way before in the 60s and was, better known. But for me at the time, I wasn't that familiar with Sasquatch. I don't even think I even heard of Sasquatch until after I heard about the Missouri Monster. And again, with such media such as the Inquirer, the Star, and occasionally, some series, In Search of, for instance, back in the 70s with Leonard Nimoy, one of the first series that would focus on mysteries, on UFOs, on mysterious creatures, would, present about these, cryptids and about these experiences. So occasionally there were, docuseries or episodes back then that would, touch upon these subject matters. So that piqued my curiosity from there, and off I went, finding out more about these fascinating beings. Let's move on to our next, cryptid, and that would be from England. So this is known as the Black Shuck. The Black Shuck is also known as the Demon Hound in Britain. Now, I found this one particularly interesting as well because there's some evidence that this actually did occur. We'll go into that more in a moment. So, the Black Shuck was mostly known in a particular area of Britain, of England, by Blythburgh in Suffolk. And this cryptid goes back many, many years, like hundreds of years ago. And the first sighting or experience of this particular cryptid happened back in August the 4th of 1577. So that's the 16th century, imagine. But again, remember that Europe and the civilizations there, the cultures there go back thousands of years. And they have recorded their past histories quite well for the most part. So here we are in 16th century England, and this being started to be seen, in the churches of Bungay and Blythburgh, in the areas of Suffolk, England, in East Anglia, by the coastline. So this is near the water or so there, near, let's say, the Atlantic Ocean. So this being has been seen countless times throughout the centuries, even to the present, in basically the same region, of England. So this is still a reoccurring experience for many, there. Not that it happens often, but every once in a while, people will report that they have seen, this rather large black, dog, hound, or wolf-like being with glowing red eyes and can appear to be quite menacing, incredibly agile, and very, very fast. He appears out of nowhere silently and can disappear just as suddenly as it appears. There is a very famous story in Britain about the first time, one of the first times that the Black Shuck appeared. So I will read that to you. And it happened one evening, and it was near the church of Blythburgh. There was a thunderstorm happening that evening. There were two people praying in the Holy Trinity Church. Suddenly, a large thunderclap was heard. And all of a sudden, the doors burst open, and this gigantic black dog or wolf-like creature just ran into the church. He ran past a large congregation. Also, there was several people, but there were two people in particular praying. A man and a boy, young boy, were killed, by this being. Just grabbed them by the neck and just killed them, just bit right into them. And then the steeple of the just collapsed, from the church. because the tremendous, power that was happening there, the energy was so immense. Then as the dog, as they call it, ran out, he left scorch marks on the north door. Now, the interesting thing is that those scorch marks, or those claw marks, are still there on that church door till this very day, all these hundreds of years later. I can attest to that because I did see a show or a documentary devoted to this very, cryptid. And they actually went to the church, which still stands today, just as magnificently as it did back then in the 16th century. They repaired the roof, obviously, and they showed, the actual space inside where this occurred and the actual north door with the claw marks very strongly and visibly still present on the doors. And there are these huge black, almost like bird-like claw marks, on those large wooden doors. And they've been preserved to this day. So we have some evidence, there, and eyewitness accounts. And this was not, of course, the only time that black shook appeared. There have been other appearances of it. What you see to the right on the presentation here is a recreation of what, that looks like. So again, it's a rather large, hound, even larger than the regular wolf. You almost say you could call it like a dire wolf, in size and in power and strength. And as I said, throughout the centuries, there have been, other sightings of this running through the moors, usually in the evenings, appears out of nowhere, usually close to the woodlands or the forests, but occasionally, sometimes you can see it, from the roadway. Running or so, has run after, some cars, at high speed, but then suddenly vanishes, disappears. It can be threatening at times, but other times can be protective. There's one incident where it said that there was a young girl that was being attacked, by some other animals or whatever, and suddenly the black shook appeared and chased, these other, animals away from the dog and saved, this little girl. So at times the black shook can be a protective, being, and other times it can appear quite menacing. So even as recently as May of 2014, it was seen that a large dog, as of 2014, they were doing some excavations in Leiston Abbey, which is not too far, from that region in Suffolk. And they noted that they found a grave with the bones of a rather large dog, there in that area there, near this ancient, church that I do believe is not really there so much anymore. It's just the ruins. But they did discover that burial. And the bones are very clear. I've seen the pictures as well. And it is a rather large dog, larger than a wolf, at least from what I saw. And they started doing examinations of these things, and they could vouch that, number one, that they claimed that the dog was basically the black shook, or could be. They're saying that it was a 2.36 feet in height, around the size of a mastiff, which are quite a large animal, or a Saint Bernard, or even a Great Dane. The carbon dating of the bones indicated that this dog was buried there between 1650, 1690, 1730, 1810, which is around the same period of time, there in the 17th century or so. And the dog, the black shook was seen for decades after, as I said, hundreds of years after, from time to time, or even post 1920s. So it goes back a long way. But I'll focus more on the 1650s, 1690 period, because the grave had that appearance, had that look, and because of the grounds of the church, which date back to that period or even beforehand. And that they say that the animal was likely to have been interred when there was no surface trace of the original building remaining. So it could have been after. So that's why they say maybe post 1920 or so. But looking at the grave, it looked very, very old, had that style for that period. You see bones of a dog that doesn't look like a regular dog. looks kind of like a wolf, but larger. They can't say for sure whether this is indeed some sort of a very just large dog. They can't guarantee it 100%, or something different. So they don't really, want to admit whether this is indeed something that they just don't know exactly what type of creature this is. So there's some evidence there that lends itself to make you think. And so many witnesses for so many hundreds of years. We had people just a few years ago saying that they saw, out in the moors, suddenly a black figure appearing with glowing red eyes, running very fast, looking like some sort of gigantic wolf, running through the lands, running through the moors, as they call them over there, and then suddenly just vanishing without explanation. So people are still seeing this being after all this time. So what does this mean? Is this some sort of very rare animal that keeps itself very, very well hidden, like so many other cryptids do? Nearly impossible to find evidence for these things. And when they do, scientists usually debunk any evidence that's presented for the most part, or at the very least, they'll say they're not sure, they're not certain. That seems to be happening more and more, where scientists are really saying more when they get some sort of evidence that they're not sure. So actually, that's kind of a good sign, as opposed to just saying, oh no, this is not that, or this is something else, or whatever. Either they were lying or they were just covering up. So now they're going more into the area where they're just saying it's unknown and leaving it more open. Is this some sort of experiment somehow? But going back to that period of time, the 16th century, there wasn't that type of sophisticated science really to be making such experiments, but then you never know. There were some pretty bright people back then, and who knows what they could have done or whatever to create something of this sort, and it got out of hand. We don't know. Who knows if we'll ever find out. But then again, science has come a long way. There are new technologies, new ways of research and scientific exploration, and gradually more and more is being revealed. So it's still open out there for us to learn. Moving on. Oh, before I move on, I selected this particular being because, again, there was enough evidence from eyewitnesses for centuries describing basically the same type of being, similar experiences. Again, people that are normal, healthy, respectable, regular normal people living their lives and reporting this type of being, of what they saw, this incredible experience for them, and too numerous to ignore. So I went on that, and I went on my feeling and my intuition that there's something genuine going on here. And this particular being, as with many of the cryptids, have a sort of, let's say, interdimensional quality. And that's what all of the beings we're talking about here are sharing. A sort of mysterious interdimensional type of experience of life force. I'll elaborate more about that later on. Moving on. The next cryptid is a local in the East Coast here, or Eastern region, from New Jersey, known as the Mantis Man, or mantis creature. Now, I found this to be very, very unusual, and I've just fairly recently learned about this cryptid. I'd say about maybe almost 2 years ago. So this is a newer being for me to learn about here. And when I first saw it, and it was on one of the cables, series, that provide, this type of, programming, I was really taken aback by this, but it also struck a nerve for me for reasons I'll explain more in a moment. Anyway, the Mantis Man is one of the newer, of the cryptids to know about, to learn about. And it's only basically had like about 2 eyewitness accounts that are, let's say, better known. There may be a few others, but not so well documented or well known. So this goes back to like about, I think, 2010 or so. So it's not, this is one of the, I guess, one of the newer of the cryptid beings. So the picture that you see there that I've placed is actually a recreation. It is not a real picture, of this being. However, it's very well done, if you notice. And this description was provided by the eyewitnesses of what they saw. And they did a very good job. You can see reflection even in the water there, in the stream. So very, very well put together. That's why I selected it. So you get a pretty good image of what these people actually saw. The smaller photo to the right is a real mantis. So you can see it looks very, very, very close to what an actual mantis, looks like. I've had the good fortune of occasionally seeing real mantis, from time to time, and they're quite spectacular creatures and quite special. I've even had the good fortune a long time ago to hold, a mantis in my hand at least 2, maybe 3 times. They're actually quite gentle. Once they're not afraid of you, they'll climb right on your hand, and they're quite extraordinary. And there's an intelligence there, and just an energy there of there's life, there's a spark, there's intellect, there's something that thinks, and the gentleness also, quite lovely, quite lovely. But to see something that could be from 7 to 8 feet tall in the middle of the woods, is another thing. And that's what happened to the witnesses here. The Mantis Man has always been seen basically in this area of New Jersey, near Hackettstown. It's always been seen by this river known as the Musconetcong River, and it's in that region that this being or beings, it may be more than one, exists. So as one eyewitness, stated, the first one said, he was chest high in the river. I do believe he was fishing. A lot of people like to go fishing, there in the rivers there. And a lot of good fish, are abundant. And he just spotted from the distance, this being that looked like a large grasshopper, but then it was just bending over, but then it was kind of like large. And when it rose, it was like a good 7 feet or so. And when the mantis being, caught wind that it was being spotted, immediately started moving away. And for some reason, as the witness says, the mantis being looked quite astonished. I was moving away and looked back with an intense gaze in those eyes and looked surprised that it was being seen. So it moved away quickly, and the gentleman didn't pursue it or didn't take a picture. He was in such a state of shock. He didn't know what to do. And that was the first eyewitness account. A better known account happened a while later, and this is in the mid-2000s or so. And it was by 2 brothers that were also fishing in the river in Stevens State Park in New Jersey. So at this point, it was around dusk, as it says here. I remember seeing one of these brothers when he gave an eyewitness account, on a docuseries there on cable. So he was willing to be interviewed directly, and he told his story. And he said he was just fishing there in the river, and suddenly from the distance, his brother was about 50 yards away from him, the other side, a little further down. And he saw from the river near where the river is, and then where there's the land, meeting there by the levee, for lack of a better way of saying it. And I know that's more of a Louisiana term, but by the edge of the river there, he saw this large mantis-like being there. In his case, he said it was kind of gray and black, stood like about 6 to 7 feet tall. He was frozen in horror, in shock, he couldn't believe what he was seeing. From the way he was describing it, from watching him describe it, he was in an actual state. He was just petrified as what he was seeing. He just could not believe it, and he just froze. And he said that the mantis was there and all of a sudden spotted him. And that when the mantis being did see him, he started to stand up even more and reached like about a good 7 feet tall. He said it was a very powerful looking being, even though it looked kind of delicate because it was like a brownish black and it had the exoskeleton and had a humanoid presence to him. But he sensed that he could sense an intelligence from the being. And he heard like a humming sound coming from this being as well. And for a while there, he felt that he was being mesmerized. He couldn't really move. And like somehow he was paralyzed, there. So that added more to his terror. As the being saw him and stood up, suddenly the wings started spreading, like almost like giving a threatening gesture. And he said at that moment he was actually in a state of panic because he said it looked so powerful that he could have just, ripped him apart from the strength that this being looked like he had. Luckily, he just stood still, just was frightened out of his mind. At this point, his brother caught a glimpse, of the being also, and couldn't believe what he was seeing either, and was just petrified also. So it was more than just this gentleman, it was both of them seeing this being at the same time. At that point, the mantis being just had turned and started walking up, from the water, to the embankment, and started walking upward. And as he did, would look back because kept staring at him with this intense gaze. And what this man said, as the mantis being was walking away from the water onto the land, just before it reached into the woodlands from there, he started to just fade, like disappear. Right there, in the middle of his vision. He just disappeared right in front of him. And then when that occurred, he just started to come out of that shock, the buzzing, the humming that he heard left. And he was just left there in a daze and a state of shock. And his brother were there and, helped him, because he was such a petrified, and they just raced out of there. They couldn't believe the experience. So then they reported it later on once they regained their senses because they were in such a state, and started telling this story. And then, of course, this was heard from the news outlets, etc., gradually, and we have the news accounts that you see here, today. So again, talking about this particular being, once again, primarily seen in Hackettstown in New Jersey by the Musconetcong River, one of those ancient Indian, Native American names. It can be between 6 feet to 8 feet tall and is always seen or has been seen near the water. I do believe there have been another maybe 3 or 4 accounts of this actually being seen, also. So they're not the only ones at this point. It tends to emit like that buzzing or humming noise, appears out of nowhere, and is always near, the river. Seems to be startled when people, when he sees people. So for some reason, this being seems to be able to cloak itself. And for some reason, occasionally, it may drop its cloak without knowing it. And then people have spotted it. And once, it notices that it's being seen, tends to immediately retreat, has never been really threatening except for that one time with this gentleman, but I guess because of close proximity that it was, but that threatening gesture may have been more just to frighten the person away, not to attack. And then tends to walk away and disappear into the brush, into the woodlands. So this being, is another one of those things they tend to think, well, where did this come from? Is this some sort of just unusual, very large insectoid figure? Is this a scientific experiment somehow that somehow escaped in some way, or was just tossed out into the area there? Because it's only been basically seen in this area of New Jersey. There, as far as I know, there are no other reports of being seen anywhere else. Is this some sort of spiritual interdimensional type of being with an extraterrestrial origin, similar to the other cryptids? It's not really known. It hasn't been seen enough yet. So this is a newer being, and let's see, perhaps in the future, more people will have experiences spotting this, since it seems to be concentrated in a particular area. What strikes a lot of people, especially scientists, curious is that mantis are not known for inhabiting water. They usually hang out, on leaves in dry land. But for some reason, this particular being seems to be seen very close to or in, water. The few times that it has been seen. So there's a curiosity happening here. If you look at the presentation here, you can find out more. I've posted the websites where this information comes from, for each of these beings. Our last cryptid for the evening is something called the night crawlers. And I just learned about them about a year ago or so. And I found this to be very, very unusual. And these are seen, here in this country, even though they've been seen also in Europe. Now, these are very, very rare. They're a newer form of cryptid that's being known. What you're seeing here in the presentation is actual video footage of the beings being caught in the middle of the night. And they've basically been seen in Fresno, California. That was the very first time in 2010 when they were captured on video in the middle of the night. Now, this is in a residential neighborhood in Fresno. And there's a row of houses, and then there's a street or roadway, and then there's a large park land area across the street. So a gentleman who lives across the street from this park actually had a surveillance camera on overnight. And then when he was reviewing, his camera one night or one day, he happened to see, these beings caught, on video, walking, in the park. And there were at least two of them or so. And he was like, he couldn't believe what he was seeing either. This is not the clearest, picture, but this was the best one that I could find to present here this evening. I've actually seen this video on television, and it is quite eerie and interesting to see, because they're the type of beings that you would consider, you just feel that there's something out there in the woods. There are other beings and things that we're not accustomed to that are hidden and occasionally just appear out of nowhere. And they fit that type of category as these. And they're basically, and you can see the photographs that I've presented on the right, is an artist's illustration. And that's a clearer depiction of what they actually look like. And they've seen more than two of them at a time, obviously. And they just look like this white being, which are mostly legs and a small body. Not sure if there's anything that's like eyes or appears to be eyes or so, just these pair of legs or so. And their joints are like backward. So when they walk, their knees don't go forward. Their knees go backward, but their legs or their feet go forward as they move. And they walk in a very stilted type of manner. And this was extremely unusual to see. The gentleman who lives here, of course, has lived, in Fresno, California, practically his entire life. Had never seen anything like this before. He's a regular person, who works, regular job, has a family, not prone to anything like this at all, first time ever. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. He presented the film, obviously for, to the police or so, and then to the scientists to review. And, they can't make out of it. They can't say it's not something that's doctored. It's not something that's been faked, at least his video, because there have been others that have come out since. And those You know, they have looked into, they said, no, that's fake or that's been photoshopped, etc. With his video, which is the first of its kind, they can't say, you know, that this is fake. They said this is not something that's been, you know, faked in any way or whatever. They just don't know what to make of it. And these are, you know, scientists that are, you know, experienced with examining these types of things yourself. So as you see here, this is the video capture from 2010. These creatures are rather small. They differ in size. However, they've been seen elsewhere also. There's a creature that is similar to it, known as the Carmel area creature from Highland County in Ohio. And there have been eyewitnesses that have seen something that looks similar to this, but those are large. They're like about 7 feet, or that one is about 7 feet tall. And it was a gentleman who happened to spot it. You know, one night with his wife, they were driving back home, and they just had moved into the area about a month before. And they were, you know, just driving along the road in a high area. Suddenly, it was in the evening, they saw this 7-foot looking creature that looked very much like that. You know, with just 2 giant legs or so, just running across the roadway. So they saw it for a few seconds and went into the woods. But then again, these people, once again, are people that are not, you know, known for being crazy. They're not dramatic or whatever. And they reported seeing this being. And it's been known as a Carmel area creature because where they live is called Carmel Road in Highland County, Ohio. And then another video capture has been seen in Yosemite, also of being similar to the nightcrawler and to the Carmel area creature as well. I didn't find video on that, unfortunately. I will keep looking. So this was also been seen a few times. The last time the nightcrawler has been seen was, we believe, was in Poland. So that's in Europe, where a gentleman, you happen to capture it on video. You know, also, it looks very much like the nightcrawler as well. So we see that this being not only is in the United States and in this one area here, but has also been seen in Europe as well too. The thing with these types of cryptids is that they're not common to see. They're rare to be spotted. That adds to the reality of these things. If you were seeing this thing all the time or whatever, well, it would depend. But they're not seen that often, and then when people do report it, it's people that, you know, are, again, not accustomed, you know, to doing things of this nature. You know, they're normal, regular people. So reading from here, that a nightcrawler appeared to be like 4 feet 11 inches for examination from the video. They move very strangely. They're basically legs, plus extremely small upper body, no arms, no other appendages. Extremely thin, very pale white, which seems to happen with these types of cryptids when they're in this form or so. Those beings and others that are similar to this in some way usually appear to be very, very like delicate, usually very slender, thin, very pale in color, in pallor, look very much like of spirit, you know, ethereal looking. And it seems to be a commonality that these particular cryptids seem to share, even though they're in different forms, different areas, you know, different states, different countries even, but they have that commonality, you know, that they share. Larger specimens have reported to have webbing connected from each knee to the torso even. They have usually stick-like feet for the most count. And again, they haven't been seen very often. The videos, because they're mostly, you know, videos shot at night, don't have the clearest, you know, viewing, you know, for that's not sharp, clear pictures, you know, of these things. But they are known, they've been seen a few times. As I said, last time seen in 2017, not that long ago. So as you can see, there are cryptids throughout the entire world. Every country, every culture has its own reports of mysterious, unusual looking creatures, beings, monsters, spirits, or whatever, you know, reported for hundreds of years, maybe thousands of years back. Here's a map that I found, of cryptids throughout the world. As you can see, all over the planet, there are many different types of cryptids, whether they're, from the waters, such as the Loch Ness Monster, Ogopogo, as we know also. We've heard about, in this country or in Ireland, whether there are these mysterious, ethereal-looking creatures, such as the night crawler, such as the Wendigo, here in Native America as well too, in Canada, also. We have gargoyles and so from Europe, even though they say that gargoyles aren't real, but we have elves and dwarves from Britain, from Ireland, Scotland, from Iceland, the elves that have been known, the leprechauns of Ireland, those can be considered cryptids. We have dragons, reptilian creatures, especially, from Asia, from China. Even here in this country, reptilian snake-like beings, or so that have been seen or spotted, especially in the rivers, in the streams, from time to time. We have ape-like creatures, such as Bigfoot, the Yeti, Sasquatch, the Avasti from Russia, all related. The skunk ape from Florida, different forms of the Bigfoot, family, different heights, different sizes, ranging from 7 to 8 feet, all the way up to 10 feet or more. I once saw, not that I saw it in person, but I once saw a video capture, which I'm still desperately looking for, from one of the shows that they presented, of a gentleman who was in his cabin. He was outside chopping some wood. He had a video surveillance camera, luckily, at the time, and he was chopping wood. He got a feeling of something behind him. When he looks back from a good 30 feet or so from him, there was the most gigantic Bigfoot ever seen, clearly standing there, staring right at him. A massive 10-foot, Bigfoot must have weighed like 600 pounds. Chestnut brown hair, gigantic, beautiful actually, from what I saw. Just absolutely impressive. As soon as he was spotted, in 3 or 4 steps that it took, disappeared from his sight. Because such a large being with such a wide step, immediately 3 or 4 steps, and he just disappeared into the woods. He could not find him, couldn't find anywhere. But he had this gigantic video of him, which was absolutely so clear and so impressive. And I have to see if I can find that. As soon as I do, I'll put that on my page immediately. Anyway, we have different forms of these beings in different ways, different anomalies of these beings from the sea, the Kraken, also known from the Pacific, even the Atlantic also, from ancient times, from Greek or mythologies. We have many different beings throughout the world have reported being spotted, being seen, whether they're stories, whether they're mythology, but where there's evidence of them. For hundreds of years, nothing new for us, and more to come. There will be more to be discovered as science and technology has improved and is rapidly evolving more and more. They have different methods, different ways of researching these things, of searching for them, of finding them, of collecting evidence, and who knows what we'll discover in the next few years. So I leave you with this to think about, to ponder. And that fits with this picture that I've placed here. We think of these things as being so incredible, even dangerous, frightening. What must the cryptids think of us? Do they find us just as strange, just as frightening, just as mysterious as we find them? Hence, that is why they disappear so quickly and with very little evidence, seemingly impossible to ever capture, because they're so frightened of us as we are of them. Something to think about. So I'll leave you with that. And again, this video will be posted on my Facebook page, the Angelus Colon Transpsychic Express, as well as my YouTube channel, Metaphysical Communion. So let's bring this portion of the program to a conclusion. And stop share here. Here we go. And I hope you found that interesting, enlightening. It's a fascinating subject because there's so much that's not known, but there are many people out there that have devoted their lives and their livelihood to seeking out these creatures, doing explorations, looking for them, hunting for them even, to see, you know, what evidence they can collect. They can finally meet face to face with one of them in such a way where they can videotape them, use audio that will be unmistakable with 100% proof that indeed these beings are real. We have several of those things happen already. A lot of people may doubt them, but a lot of the evidence that we've captured on video and audio seem to be very, very real and credible. And the people that do capture them are 100% clear that indeed what they saw is indeed what they saw and that it is real. And more of that is being revealed all the time. So things are heading in the right direction. So on that note, let's conclude the program. And I hope that it makes you, inspires you to seek out more information about these things and learn more about them and find out more about other obscure, you know, cryptids that are out there. Perhaps I'll do another program again, you know, and talk about a few other more unusual, you know, cryptids that are not as well known. There are many out there to talk about. So let's move on from that. And now I'm going to offer, you know, for the rest of our program as a spot readings out there for you. So let me see if I can capture this. Oops, hold on a second. I'm back. Okay, here we go. So I had a little bit of interruption there for a moment. Sorry. I said I was going to spread things a bit and recapture things and didn't work out. So hold on a moment. Let me just recalibrate and see if we can capture our live video again. Okay, hold on. Okay, good. Let's come back. Okay, and here we go. Hopefully you can see me and hear me. Postpone my video. There we go. Perfect. Okay. So if any of you are out there, whatever, you'd like to find out more about who's out there for you, I'm up and ready for live readings for you. So let me just see if I can find myself here on the cellular and see if we can go into the chat window here for you and see if anybody is out there. So because I need to see your questions in order to be able to provide you readings after all. Okay, let's see. Trying to get to see if I can get you on here. I'm doing a different method and I'm using Google Chrome Beta to see if hopefully it would improve the connection. It has to a certain extent, but it's not letting me really see the chat window here. So that's fascinating. Hold on a second. Let me check you in Zoom itself. Always something to see. Just come back here for a moment. Go back to my page. See what comes up here. Always fascinating. Here we go. Let's look into chat. I don't think there's anybody in chat. No, nobody waiting either. Interesting connections. But this is how we learn when we try something new. So let me just bring that chat window down. I'll see somebody joins, you know, the other way. Oh dear, I was hoping to do spot readings for you this evening. And things are not loading here as they should. Let me see if I can get this down. Let me see if I can find another way to connect with you guys. I'm looking here in my cellular. I usually have 3 different things going on simultaneously. If I don't see you in one way, I usually see you in another way. And let's see. Not popping either. Let's see. Oh, well. Not popping either. Well, that's disappointing. Oh, well. Well, that's disappointing. Just buffering here. Let me go back. Just buffering here. There's usual extravaganza that happens lately every Friday night. But at least the first portion of the program, was recorded and is in. So hopefully you have seen and heard that well, and I'll be posting it again. So that's a good thing at least. And I will have to re-examine about posting in Google Beta Chrome in the future then. Because apparently the connection is not as spectacular as I hoped. Let's see if I can get back to seeing myself here. Okay. Well, I see a live shot and I see buffering, but no, couldn't play the video. Oh dear. Isn't that special? Okay. Try one more time. If not, we will call it an evening then. Okay? We don't want to waste time here for you or for me. Try one more time. If not, and I have to cut this out of the video or so. So anyway, on that note, since things are working unusually, we are going to then call the program to a close. I hope you found it interesting, fascinating. I apologize, unfortunately, I couldn't do the readings because of connection issues here. But I will be back next week for my Halloween special. For Metaphysical Communion. I did the first one last year, and that was a lot of fun. And so I'm going to do it again. Also, there will be spot readings, divination, happening next week. Surprises as well, also for next week's show to celebrate Halloween. Let's see, I may do it on a Saturday because Friday evening, the 29th, there's something special that I will be attending. So I won't be doing it then. So I may be doing it either on Saturday night or on Halloween itself, October 31st. Okay, so that'll be Sunday. So we'll see. So for all of you, once again, have a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful weekend. Have a beautiful week. Things are going to go better now astrologically for all of us. We will have calmer energy. Things will be going our way, finally, as opposed to being all disrupted or so, as it has been the last month or so. So good times are coming for the rest of October, which is a week or so left. And November promises to be a very exciting month. So get ready for that. That month will be a little bit more, let's say, dramatic. So there'll be some good things and then some, let's just say, impressive things in the energies for the month of November. So get ready and hold on. It's not going to be boring. And that's all I'll say on that for now. So have a good evening, wonderful rest of the week. Cheers to all of you. And I'll see you next week for our Halloween special on Metaphysical Communion. So everyone, blessings, have fun for the rest of the night, and have a good night.